and there's 3 or 4 delegations associated with that. So the point of this briefing is to help you prepare for that. So a quick recap. The point of this is really just to help you get up to speed and just to remember where we are in the establishment timeline. So we have, up till now, we've been referring to day 0, which was October, and that was the incorporation of Te Aki Wai and the appointment of the board. Day 1, so along the top of that timeline there, so day 1 we refer to as 1st of July 2026, and that's when Te Aki Wai will become operational. Along the bottom of that timeline there, what I've highlighted, or tried to highlight in blue at least, is where we are today. So where we are is the establishment phase of the program. And the establishment phase, each of the councils have a number of responsibilities, and so do the establishment team who are actually setting up and transferring Wellington Water to Te Aki Wai. So from a council's perspective, there are a number of things we need to work through, and there are a number of decisions that, or several decisions that I'll be asking of you. So most of those decisions are in this discussion today around the foundation documents. There is also conversations and agreement needed to be had around the statement of expectations that need to be issued to Te Aki Wai. We need to progress the transfer agreement, which will be next year. We will be entering into a number of service level agreements with Te Aki Wai, and then us ourselves as a council need to ready ourselves to be operationally different in how we work with this new entity, how we reshape our services internally as well. And then Te Aki Wai has a similar, I guess, the opposite side of the coin of those establishment responsibilities. If you haven't got to the report that was provided to my report that was provided to you yesterday, what is in there as well, especially for the newer elected members, is the history of the decisions that were taken to get us to this point. So just to help you plot the path and see what decisions were made and when. So I have no intention of taking you through that today, but it's that history is provided for you. So when we talk about the foundation governance documents, there's a suite of 5 documents. Today's conversation is focused on the Constitution and the Partners Agreement, but I also appreciate that you have an interest in the Statement of Expectations in particular. So towards the end of these slides, I will briefly touch on the Statement of Expectations, the Customer Charter, and then the Transfer Agreement, just to give you a bit of context as to where those 3 key artefacts are. The Constitution, Partners Agreement, Statement of Expectations and Transfer Agreement, those are legal documents. The Customer Charter itself is not a legal document, but it is a very important document for this council and a couple of our other partner councils to ensure there is a very strong customer ethos and a strong customer service built into Te Aki Wai from the get-go. So the approach we've taken there is to embed the Customer Charter requirement in the Statement of Expectations. That's where we get the leverage from through the Statement of Expectations. So just clarifying, those are legal documents, legal agreements other than the Customer Charter. One other thing on the governance documents, just where are the other councils at with this similar conversation? So Hutt City Council had this discussion and took their decision last Thursday, and they have adopted the Constitution and the Partners Agreement. The other councils are looking to take their decisions the week after I'll be asking you to take yours. So that's around the 9, 10, 11 December. Okay, so that's just where the other councils are at. Really important that I bring this to your attention. The journey we've been on with water has always been pretty fast and furious, and that's largely driven by what's in the legislation and the timeframes that we're required to work to. And it's no different for this current phase of work as well. So the Statement of Expectations, and I've translated the legislation to be more specific to us and our timeframes. Statement of Expectations needs to be finalised and provided to Te Aki Wai by end of December. The Water Services Strategy, so that's essentially the 10-year long-term plan for water that Te Aki Wai develop from those expectations. They're required to provide that to the Partners Committee by March next year. And then we are collectively expected to have established Te Aki Wai and for them to be operational for 1 July. So there is a risk to this council and all the councils that if there is a material delay to the establishment of any of the governance arrangements, the issuing of the statement of expectations, there is a risk that we put ourselves, the collective ourselves, in the non-compliant bracket, and that's really something we should be avoiding. So it's just if you could keep those timeframes in mind as we frame up the conversation. Okay, the enduring constitution. Look, I'm not going to read the slides word for word. I don't think anyone really enjoys that approach. But just to reiterate, back in August, a set of principles for the constitution was presented and agreed to, and those principles were used to develop the interim constitution, which is currently in place. And then that has been further developed for this the enduring constitution that has been published as part of the decision paper. The enduring constitution will replace the current interim constitution, okay? From the principles that were presented and agreed to back in August, there are two material changes that are on the screen there. It might seem quite obvious, but really just clarifying that Te Aki Wai must, in their water services strategy, articulate how the activities that are in that strategy, that 10-year plan, how they will contribute to the expectations that our councils have provided in the SOE. And then quite simply that the minimum number of directors has reduced from 5 to 3. So minimum is 3 and the maximum is 7. Okay. So that's the constitution. Then we move on to the Partners Committee and the agreement for the committee. So throughout the journey of water, there's always been proposed that there would be a governing committee. For a long time, I think it had a working title, so it's now formally identified as the Partners Committee. The Partners Committee will comprise of one representative from each of the 5 councils and then one representative as well from each of Ngāti Toa and Taranaki Whānui. So collectively we have 5 shareholder councils and 2 mana whenua partners. So as it says there, the role of the committee is to provide governance and oversight of the company, being Te Aki Wai, and it's a forum for representatives to coordinate and exercise their powers in respect of Te Aki Wai. So that forum to coordinate is quite an important phrase or a statement because because we are required to provide joint instruction and joint expectations and joint governance to Te Aki Wai. So having the Partners Committee is a really important part of the governance structure, and how it operates is also as important. The papers that you've received, Schedule 2 of the Partners Agreement, just to point out to you if you want to delve into detail, it does articulate the reserved matters for shareholders versus the reserved matters for partners. So if you are interested in that, and then Schedule 3 of the Partners Agreement has the actual terms of reference for the committee as well. I wasn't planning on taking you through those in detail today. Happy to answer questions, but hence pointing out those sections if you are interested. Appreciate that might be a little bit hard to read on the screen. If that's too hard to see on the screen, I'm happy to skip this. All I was planning to do here was just quickly talk you through the structure. I thought that might be useful. If we start on the left-hand side, you have the 5 councils grouped together. Those 5 councils are the shareholders, and so they will engage and have shareholder reserve matter decisions to take in relation to Te Aki Wai, and that's the up arrow that goes up and along and drops down into Te Aki Wai. Under the council grouping on the left-hand side, you have mana whenua, as I say, Taranaki Whānui and Ngāti Toa. So those 2 plus the 5 councils together, 1 representative each, form the Partners Committee. The Partners Committee engages directly with the board, so that's the up arrow from the Partners Committee up to the board. Oh, thank you, Steph. Thank you. And then the Partners Committee they have the responsibility and the accountability for finalising, so agreeing and finalising the statement of expectations and issuing that to Te Aki Wai. And also the returning water services strategy comes back to the Partners Committee. So I appreciate that might look a little bit busy and a bit complicated, but it's trying to set out the decision-making, the relationship between the councils, mana whenua, the collective partners, and Te Aki Wai themselves. Okay, and we can always come back to that if you have specific questions on that. So the Partners Committee and the agreement itself, how did we get to the agreement? So again, back in August, there were, lost my words, principles, sorry. A set of principles and term sheet were presented. They were generally agreed to with the exception of two conditions, and they were that the proportional voting model was progressed to the point where it would recognise Wellington City Council's size and scale of contribution relative to the other councils. There was also a requirement to further discuss the exit term, and ideally for that to be a 4-year period. The resolution that was taken was for the Wellington City Council representative to advocate to the other councils to progress those two matters. The proportional voting was progressed and resolved with a model being agreed, and then the 4-year exit term was not agreed to, and communication was sent out early October to confirm the outcome of those discussions. Just to also clarify, since those principles and term sheets were presented, what else has changed? So there is now included in this version a provision to appoint an independent chairperson. So that's not to say an independent chairperson will be in place, but it is a provision if the partners decide that they would want to use that. That independent chairperson would be non-voting and would not form part of the quorum. Okay. So we've added in sections around the transfer agreement and ensuring that there is, again, a provision for day one working capital should it be needed. Also, making sure that there is agreement around the review of the partners agreement and around the secretariat of the committee. So for those that don't know, the current Wellington Water Committee, the secretariat is Hutt City Council, so this is slightly different, and that the secretariat role may be provided by shareholders on a rotating basis. That's really up to the Partners Committee, assuming as it's established, that's still your decision to take. But if it were to be established, then that's up to the partners to determine how that role is provided. So shareholder and partner voting. So I thought it might be worthwhile just highlighting this. Where did this land? So for shareholder reserve matters, so again, councils, shareholders are councils, and the reserve matters there are very limited, okay? So that's 75% majority with each council having 1 vote apiece. For the Partners Committee, that is the group of 7 representatives, for any resolution, WCC would have 3 votes, Hutt 2, and all other representatives would have 1 vote apiece. So what that means is for partner reserve matters, and for that we're talking about appointing or removing directors, we're talking about director remuneration, we're talking about adopting the statement of expectations. So for those important matters, it would require 66.6% with the majority of representatives being represented. So what that means is no one council can override decisions. It requires a majority at all times, and it does. So it does give more of an even keel rather than what is in place today with the Wellington Water Committee. Okay. And to clarify our mana whenua partners, so thinking about our Tākaihere agreement and our relationship there. So all the way through the development of these governance arrangements and the establishment planning, our partners have been directly engaged and directly involved. And both Ngāti Toa and Taranaki Whānui have confirmed who their representatives would be, and they are also in agreement to the governance arrangements that are being proposed here. Those representatives, the agreement of those will be subject to agreement at the Partners Committee, and that is one of the recommendations that is in your Council Committee report, is to recommend that Wellington City Council's representative has the delegated authority to agree those representatives. That was all on mana whenua, and then you'll be pleased to know the last slide from me is, as I said at the beginning, I would cover off the other 3 documents that are in the suite of governance arrangements. So the Statement of Expectations, when I wrote this and it was sent out to you, or since I've done that, sorry, you've obviously received the draft Statement of Expectations, but just to confirm, the draft has been provided, as we're required to, it has been provided to Te Aki Wai. They have responded to the draft, so the version that you have received this morning includes Te Aki Wai's commentary. The ideal situation is that the Partners Committee is stood up, they would meet mid-December and they would look to finalise and agree and issue or produce, I think is the legislative word, produce the Statement of Expectations mid-December. The Customer Charter, so the principles that were agreed to in August are still our underlying principles across councils as to what we expect to see in the Charter. The Charter has been fully embedded into the Statement of Expectations as a mandatory requirement that there is a Charter present at all times. But the progression of that Charter is now with Te Aki Wai. It is their commitment, it is their service promise to the community, so they need to take that forward. There is a commitment that they will provide that back to the Partners Committee, when the Charter is being developed up, that they will provide that back to the Partners Committee for review to make sure it is still in line with the principles and the intent from councils. And then the transfer agreement, so that's looking out to next year. So this is just me, I hope, ideally giving you assurance that we will be coming back to talk to you next year, and we'll start some conversations around the transfer process, starting with some principles for transfer as before we shape up the actual transfer agreements, and then come to you in June asking to execute that transfer. Okay. I did say at the beginning that it would be a pretty quick whistle stop through the slides because I felt it was important to give you space for questions. So at that point, I will hand back to you, please.
Cool. Councillors, if you have any questions, Councillor Randall, Councillor Roger, and Councillor Chang.
Yes, thanks. I've got a few. Could you just get back to that bit about the votes, because there was a 66% vote that I didn't quite get what that was about versus the majority. So resolutions by 66. Oh, that's partner reserve matters and shareholder reserve matters. Okay. So thank you. And it just so early on, there was also some discussions around how long this voting setup would last, and it was maybe perhaps subject to a 2-year review. Has that now become part of the 5-year review?
Yes, it has, although logically also what is included is if anything material were to change, let's say around the pricing models or around the entry and exit of councils, then that would also trigger a review, because we'd need to ensure that the arrangements are still fit for purpose and working for everybody involved. Yes, but ultimately, councillor, yeah, that would be the 5-year review.
Okay, and I mean, there's a number of things in there. I guess I was wondering if you could just explain, as part of the transfer stuff, because I think I've got a few questions around that, around the charges, because it talks about moving towards harmonising the charges over a period of time. But I guess I want to start with what's going to happen in the first year of charges, and is it because they may not even be able to bill until the second year of operations. So I wonder if you could. I know it's not quite in the expectations, but I think I just want to understand that. But
happy to take that question, councillor. So Te Aki Wai have to bill in the first year. They have to have that revenue source, so there will be no delay to billing. What all councils are working to at the moment is for councils to provide an at cost on behalf of billing service. So that means that once Te Āki Wai determine the pricing schedule, and I will come back to that bit, once they determine the pricing, that information will be provided to each council, and each council will be responsible for, and under a service level agreement, for producing the billing for their own communities. Water charges. Those water bills will be separate to council rates bills. They will be branded Te Āki Wai. They will be separate. So definitely billing will be happening in year one.
So it's a bit like the regional council bills that we do now.
It would be a physically separate, yes. In terms of the pricing, so once the statement of expectations is issued, ideally at the end of this year, Te Āki Wai will take that. They will then confirm the pricing arrangements for all users, and that will come back to the Partners Committee through the Water Services Strategy for us to review. Now, it may be that we've set such hugely ambitious expectations that it's going to push the charging up, and so that's our opportunity just to rethink that. So that pricing that is agreed in the Water Services Strategy, that is what will be the key driver and the input to the ratepayers' water charges that will start from July. Probably the frequency hasn't been determined yet, but it's likely to be quarterly, similar to ours.
Okay, thank you. Could I go on the list again?
Roger.
Thanks very much. I just wanted to clarify the proportional...
Councillor Chang, just a second.
Oh,
Councillor
sorry.
Roger first.
Yep.
Yeah, just around for a point of clarification, the 66.66%, my interpretation of that is WCC alone cannot veto, but with one other party it could. Not to frame it only in the negative, but...
So essentially, round numbers, any party would, well, they would need, for any resolution, you would need 7 votes.
Yep, fantastic.
Yep. So WCC has 3, so there would need to be 2 others.
Yep, okay.
Yep.
And then just in the end of that where it says it's not a partner reserve matter, resolutions are passed by a simple majority. So I understand there are shareholder reserve matters and partner reserve matters. Are there issues that are neither of those things?
Not that have been identified to date. That's more of a catch-all. So the partners agreement in Schedule 2 is quite a long list of reserved matters, shareholder and partner. So between the 2 of those, it's pretty much everything.
Okay. And just in terms of the consumer charter, I've only got halfway through the SOE, but I was wondering in terms of what mechanisms do we use to, I guess, hold the organisation accountable to that charter, recognising that it's an agreement between themselves and consumers as opposed to us being a partner of that agreement?
So that was partly the reason for embedding it in the Statement of Expectations, so that the Partners Committee would have that leverage to monitor the commitment to the Charter and how it's being implemented and brought to life. So the Partners Committee, one of their roles will be to monitor the performance of Te Āki Wai and monitor the performance against the expectations that we have issued. And so by embedding the Charter, the actual Charter, not just the Charter principles, but the Charter, make sure that there is one, that it's being lived up to, and that I won't try and make up an example, but that's how it's brought to life through the monitoring of the Statement of Expectations.
Fantastic. Thank you. Could I go back on the list? Thank you.
Councillor Chang.
Thanks very much. Looking at the shareholding, now, is it correct that Wellington contributes, they have about half the customers, total customers in this region and out of the 5 councils, and contributes about half the investment into it. But when we look at the shareholding that we have here, it's only 3 votes out of 7, which is it's still below our proportional investment in it. So is that, are we all comfortable with that? Like, do you think that's the best deal that Wellington can get?
That is the deal that was agreed to in October across all councils. So that is proportional in that Wellington, as the larger contributor of the councils, has the larger number of votes. I think, as we've discussed previously, what I would reiterate is that we cannot be the controlling share.
we don't want to be, I'm not asking to be the controlling share, but I'm asking that we be 50% of the shareholding.
That 50% is determined as controlling. 50% or more, we cannot.
Cool.
Okay, I still feel as if
Thank you,
we're
Mark.
in a weaker position. So the second question is regarding harmonising charges. Now, does that mean that each of the shareholding councils can actually determine what level they want their charges to be? That is, as an example, the Hutt haven't actually said so, but Upper Hutt, for example, could they come out and say that, look, because most of the water actually comes from their area, they should pay less for it? Is that possible, or are all the shareholding councils going to be charged the same amount of?
I think if any one council tried to do that, I think the other partner committee representatives would have a stern word or two to say about that councillor. So no, the intent of harmonisation. So no, let me step back from that. Just to set the scene, Te Aki Wai is being established on a cost to serve basis. So the investment that is planned for Wellington City Council, whatever it costs to serve that investment, is what the Wellington City charging mechanism will be based on. That same principle applies for Porirua, Upper Hutt, Hutt. When there is a move to harmonisation, the intent and the ideal is that there will be the same charging mechanism across the region. Doesn't matter where you live. If it is $1 per unit in Porirua, it's $1 per unit in Upper Hutt, and so on. So it is not about harmonising within any one particular territorial authority's geographical domain. It is about the region. So Te Aki Wai is a regional entity looking at regional outcomes and regional investment, bearing in mind how interconnected our water network, not just the pipes, but the actual source of the water, the outflow, the environmental damage. It is so interconnected. That is why it needs to be considered at a regional, at a macro level.
Cool.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. And before I go to Councillor Crampton next, and I have a quick question to you, Margot. And when it comes to the council, if you disagree with the partner committee, what that means for that council?
It means not just for a council, but for all 5 councils, we're in a very difficult position. So the statement of expectations, if I use the terminology that's in the legislation, the statement of expectations must be issued by the shareholders. And so for our Wellington Metro intent and our delivery model, the shareholders is termed the Partners Committee, because the mana whenua partners are very much part of that arrangement. So by not having a Partners Committee, we therefore do not have any formal mechanism to issue the joint statement of expectations. So it's not a Wellington City statement of expectations, it is a singular joint statement of expectations.
Cool.
Yeah.
Councillor Crampton, you're next, and Councillor Tivanbaka after, and Councillor Osborne.
My 2 quick questions for Margot. Firstly, what will the consequences be of non-compliance? You mentioned if we don't sign things off in time or get certain things, there would be some non-compliance to legislation. Just wondering what the consequences of that would be.
You know how there's always one question you hope someone doesn't ask?
Sorry.
Councillor, look, I actually don't know the answer to that, and the legislation doesn't provide clarification on that. I would need to get, I was going to say second opinion and come back to you on that, because I wouldn't like to cast aspersions on what that might be. But it's a position that no council would want to find itself in, and certainly not early on in a triennium, I would suggest. But I will come back to you.
Thank you. My second question is, we talk about cost to serve. Serve also includes volume of usage of water. I'm just curious about if there's been any indication given when water meters will be on the agenda and a planned installation of those. Thank you.
Thank you. So water meters has been a bit of an ongoing conversation with Wellington Water themselves and the partner councils probably for the last few years. So it's an active conversation. When we went out to consultation earlier this year, we did signal in consultation that water meters are very, very likely in the future of Te Aki Wai. And the Water Services Delivery Plan that we submitted to government in September also signalled that water meters will be in the future. The current estimates that we put in the Water Services Delivery Plan were for water meters to be introduced in about 2029, 2028, 2029. Now, that's not a big bang because that is physically not possible to implement those to every household in the region on the same day. So that would be a phased implementation. What Te Aki Wai board will do when they develop up the water services strategy and provide that back to the partners, they will confirm the timing of that, of water meters. So whether that's earlier, whether that's later, that's part of their autonomy and their decision making.
Thank you.
So for those that are already on water meters at the moment, is the expectation that the cost of service will remain the same when we do the transfer, or is there a indication of what happens to that?
So similar to the previous answer, Councillor, that will be part of the water services strategy. So that's part of Te Aki Wai's domain of decision making to determine will it stay the same, will it slightly up, slightly down, whatever it might be. Where councils have been, council's position, all 5 councils have been to minimise pricing shocks as much as possible in year one. So I would expect that principle remains for water meters as well as residential users.
Is there something in the statement of expectation that sort of suggests that as well?
Ooh, I wouldn't. I'll check that. I mean, you have the statement of expectations, the draft as well, but I can check that as well. I just, off the top of my head, I can't remember what's in there for that.
Okay. Also, can you just explain what the advantage of being the secretariat or whatever you said
The secretariat,
is? Yeah,
yes.
that's the one, secretariat. I tried to write it down in plain language, but it would be nice to know.
The minute taker, the action taker, the issuing of agendas and that kind of thing. It's not so much that there's an advantage. It's more about we're in a partnership. All 7 of us are in a partnership, and it's about there is a cost to the secretariat because it takes an officer's time to do all the collation and the preparation and the minute taking and that kind of thing. So it's not a real cost; it's more of an opportunity cost, and so it's just sharing that opportunity cost out across councils.
Okay, and also, can you just give me a quick briefing on what a reserve matter is? Because I don't even understand what a reserve matter is on this thing. Can you just, being a layman?
No. Dedicated decisions is how I would interpret it. So specific decisions that are taken for partners only, and specific decisions that can only be taken by shareholders. And I'm sure at this point the Mayor is cringing at my very clumsy definition, and I'm sure the Mayor will have a much better articulation.
But as the name says, the decisions that are reserved for one group that no other group can take. So the Partners Committee have reserved decisions, so only the Partners Committee can take it. Shareholders have reserved decisions, only the shareholders can take it. That's reserved decision. I was going to say too, just in relation to the other point about if we don't comply with the statutory deadlines, it typically means that any subsequent action, if the deadline for another action isn't met, is invalid. So for valid actions after these deadlines fall, we have to meet the deadline.
Thank you.
Councillor Osborne.
Thank you. Talking of reserve matters, the Partners Committee is responsible for the appointing of the board members. What, if any, is there any specific direction around the expertise, the knowledge, the experience that needs to sit on the board?
Yes, there is. So there is a prescribed skills matrix, and you'll find the current board or the new board, the Te Aki Wai board, were also appointed under that same skills matrix. So the skills matrix is part of the partners agreement. It is very much it's a critical part to that relationship and having the right expertise to lead this very large water organisation.
Are you just you might not be able to do this off the top of my head, and obviously I can go back and look myself, but are you able to give a brief description of what's in that skills matrix?
No, I can't off the top of my head, but I can do a quick look here while other questions are being asked and see if I can come back to you.
I wouldn't want you to be distracted. Maybe someone in the back there is having a look. I see a thumbs up.
Brilliant. Thanks, team.
Can I ask another different topic? Now, I'm right in thinking that at the moment, Wellington City Council is responsible for managing our urban catchments? Yes? Yep,
Yes.
Correct.
Yep.
What do you see is the impact of shifting to this new structure? What will that have on the way? What impact will that have on the way we manage our urban catchments?
Oh, there's a lot of detail that we need to work through, and as you can tell by this conversation, we're largely focused on getting Te Aki Wai established. This decision, assuming it's taken, allows us to park this and now move into the operational detail. So getting into transfer agreements, getting into operational service level agreements. So they will allow us to really delve down into that level of detail. So here and now, there's some high level thinking, but we really haven't progressed down into that level because we're needing to anchor these governance arrangements first.
Cool. Next, Councillor Calvert.
Yeah, it was, excuse me, you might have covered this if I might have missed it, but at the start you were talking about the other partners didn't agree to the 4-year term of review. But I just wondered, that's okay. So just with the announcements yesterday about, or was it the day before, about getting rid of regional councils, what impact do you see on this, or is this something we're not going to consider as part of this process at this point?
So at this point, Greater Wellington Regional Council are very much in the arrangement. They are very much committed to Te Aki Wai. Greater Wellington Regional Council have also signalled for some time now that they don't see themselves being an enduring partner from a bulk water supply point of view. They really would like to focus on being a regulator. And so I don't believe, and I would, to any of my Greater Wellington colleagues listening, this is not speaking on their behalf, but I don't believe that the recent announcements will fundamentally change what Greater Wellington's intent is for Te Aki Wai.
But is it likely that these agreements may well have to adapt in a couple of years' time, depending on how and there's flexibility in that to be able to do that?
Absolutely, that's been built in. So the exit term that is built in here, the 10 years is applicable to territorial authorities. And it's specifically noted as an exception for Greater Wellington Regional Council because of their signal to date of their intent. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Before I go to Councillor Randall, I will just give opportunity to Councillor Foon, who hasn't asked a question yet.
Thanks, Margot. Just a couple of questions. Could you just give us a 101 on the debt transfer, just for a little bit of historical information?
I could, however, I'm looking sideways to our CFO. I think it would be better if our CFO positioned this.
Yeah, certainly.
So, as part of our discussions and I guess agreement to enter into the Water Services Delivery Plan and working through that, Wellington City Council recognised that to transfer the assets and revenue that we receive in respect of our water, wastewater and stormwater, that would leave us with quite a gap in terms of our debt to revenue ratio. And so the previous council asked us to ensure that any transfer of our assets would be met with conditions that mean that our ratepayers are no worse off. And the recognition and the settings around that was really about ensuring that our debt to revenue ratio wouldn't change and with the transfer. So what we agreed and what was agreed through the establishment was that we transfer an amount of debt which has been agreed approximately around $700 million, although a wash-up needs to be done depending on how much is spent in the current financial year, that amount would be transferred to us in exchange for the assets, because we weren't holding debt specifically for the Three Waters assets. We manage our debt in a different way, and that we manage it as a whole pool. So we have made that agreement. So that means that our debt to revenue remains largely unchanged as from day one when our assets transfer and the revenue transfer. So we maintain that position for our ratepayers, so we don't have to, say, increase our rates exponentially to cover certain things, which could have been the scenario we were in. That was accepted on the basis that we have this, ring fencing mechanism initially to ensure that the cost to serve, or it's the cost to serve model that Margot has referred to, is implemented. So they're working on that, and over time, as we work to harmonisation, that will all be washed out. So that's the process. The amount has been agreed and the methodology has been agreed. However, what hasn't been agreed to date is what the wash-up amount will be, because that will just depend on the work that Wellington Water undertakes for the current year and how much we draw down for that, any unders and overs. We need to think about certain costs that we're incurring. So, for example, we've got an agreement that with billing, we're currently creating a separate team in-house in Wellington City Council, as are all the other councils, to set up the billing, which will be a separate bill, as has already been explained. Those costs that we're incurring will also be passed over in terms of the debt transfer as well. So there's some wash-up payments that have to go through. So that's number one. Number two is also what we're working through at the moment is the timing of when that payment and the structure of when that payment will be made. So there's a few options that we will work through, and we'll provide some advice on that at the appropriate time to the council.
Just with the Te Aki Wai pricing schedule, I'm thinking about the timing ahead of as we're making decisions around LTPs and annual plans. And I guess it was always frustrating when Greater Wellington, bless you, came in with that big bulk water charge, right, as we were about to sign it off. Oh, giggles from the back. So I guess, is there thought being given to the timing that our understanding of what those pricing schedules will look like, coupled with our own rates setting process?
So the time frame that we're collectively working to is to get that pricing via the water services strategy for early March. That is a legislated date. Where possible, we are trying to do it earlier, but if you think about the timing, it's always the timing with water, as we've said. If the statement of expectations is issued mid-December, and we're asking Te Aki Wai board to have the water services strategy finalised and back to us in February, with a summer break in between, for a lot of people, there's not a lot of time there. So whilst we are trying to get that to come through earlier, it's possible, but it's not a guarantee. So it would be March at least.
Cool. Before I go to the last question from Councillor Randall, how will the council oversight and visibility once you delegate the powers to the new entity? Because one of the delegation to this committee is oversight of the water entity. What oversight are we talking about? How do you do that once you delegate all the powers?
So the governance oversight is through the Partners Committee. Okay, so that's the direction that's given to the board. However, we still need to acknowledge that Te Aki Wai is a council-controlled organisation or council-owned organisation. So that's something we do need to work through as to what that relationship looks like. What is important to acknowledge, it is very different to the current Wellington Water. So Te Aki Wai will not be coming and asking for funding fingers crossed, touch wood, they will not be required to provide quarterly CCO reporting like we do of our other council-controlled organisations. So we need to work through what that looks like, but really the governance oversight is through the Partners Committee. That's not to say there isn't a relationship, we just need to work through what that looks like without being overly burdensome on Te Ākiwai. They have a very large job to do, and also without overstepping the role that has been delegated to Wellington City's representative on the Partners Committee.
Councillor Randall, you next.
Thank you. Next question is around about stormwater, because just as I agree with what you're saying, but I'm not sure if stormwater covers it. So I just wanted to confirm that with respect to stormwater, we still own the assets?
No.
Right.
The piped assets will transfer to Te Ākiwai. Council will retain overland assets. So for the most part, those are secondary asset or secondary for stormwater. So it's roading, it's green space. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. The harmonisation of water charges to be done by 2031, does that really mean that the isolation of the charges to initial isolation of charges by council to not cross-subsidise, well, that's essentially going to go away by 2031. So I was just wondering whether there's some information about the impact that it will have on the Wellington consumer charges, and also I was wondering if you, I think that's the main question I have about this actually going through.
Yeah. So just to reiterate, the determination of pricing is for the Te Ākiwai board. So their decision making around whether it's a lot, not a lot, stays the same, that is their decision. That's their engagement with our Partners Committee. Whether there is any indication around what harmonisation will mean to our residents and ratepayers, no, there's not at the moment, or at least not that I'm aware of, because that's with Te Ākiwai. And again, remember, we haven't issued our formal instruction to them as yet. But I would expect that to come through in the water services strategy, because that falls within the 10-year time frame.
I hear what you're saying, but in the statement of expectations, we're essentially asking them to harmonise the water by 2031, and that may be to the disadvantage of Wellington City residents and the charges that they're going to get. So I guess should we be asking for them to harmonise if it's going to mean higher charges?
It's also about thinking about Te Ākiwai as a sole water organisation for our region. And what we'd said quite some time ago is we need to find ways to maximise efficiencies. So whether that's performance efficiencies, whether it's cost efficiencies, whatever it might be. So for Te Ākiwai to maintain four sets of books to run the accounts for 3 waters for 4 councils, that's quite an overhead. And to be able to maintain and stay ahead of pricing schedules for multiple councils at any one time. So there are benefits to harmonisation from the operational efficiencies of Te Ākiwai, so we do need to bear that in mind as well. That needs to be balanced with the impact to our residents and ratepayers, absolutely, as it does for each of our councils. So that's why we provide an instruction. The answer that comes back in the water services strategy may not be to our Partners Committee liking, and so there ensues a discussion.
Okay, so could we have some information about what that might look like, just before we have this decision? About what it means to harmonise the charges, because I just get the sense that there may be no particular reason, but I just wanted to ask that.
And we still got about 5 people on the list. We got only 6 minutes to go. I will allow you to go a 20-second question and 30-second answer.
Okay.
Councillor Osborne, you next.
It's just clarifying something that in your response to Tony, you talked about stormwater assets, overland we would retain, underground would be transferred. How does that operate with water-sensitive urban design infrastructure? So I'm thinking swales, rain gardens, wetlands, where the infrastructure is really on the land. We as a council retain ownership to that?
At this stage, our first principle would say yes, but but I want to be really clear, we have made no decisions about what will transfer. There's some obvious things that will transfer, but there's been absolutely no decision made about what will transfer and what may not. There may be really good reason for us to retain a physical piece of infrastructure. Conversely, there may also be really good reasons for us to transfer swales, rain gardens. We need to work that through. At the moment, we're in the discovery phase of what are all of the assets, especially stormwater, and then how would we consider the treatment of those.
Thanks.
Councillor Roger.
Yeah, my question, I guess, is just kind of following on from Laurie's around the debt transfer, and I understand that's coming back in June, so maybe you can tell me. We'll answer that later. But I was just looking at the SOE around Te Aki Wai needs to work with the LGFA. If we need to transact some of, I guess, our exchange of assets in cash, how confident are we that Te Aki Wai will have the liquidity to be able to do that, whether it's wholly or partially?
I haven't got a clue. I would say either our CFO or we will come back to you.
Yeah, so I think it's probably a separate conversation, but we are still working through that and what the debt transfer looks like, and also looking at making sure that as they work through their own treasury policies, that with CFOs are having a conversation about their liquidity going forward as well, and what we need to put in there specifically that's come out of the S&P report that I communicated on, and I think I sent a separate email on that. So that's the kind of thinking we've been doing.
Cool, thank you.
Councillor Carvett.
Yeah, this might be the CFO and it follows on from Laurie, but the sludge minimisation plant and the funding, the extra funding that requires, and presumably, hopefully it's no more than the 85 million, but if for some reason it turns out to be more, what? I don't know.
Don't jinx us.
Yeah. I'm just being realistic. No. But what is that still to be determined in terms of that?
We still owe you a paper on how we're looking to fund that, and we're trying to work with our central government partners on that, and we'll bring some advice further back.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Tiefenbacher.
This is for Andrew as well. Hey, are you comfortable with the financial impact on council and ratepayers, or is there something we're missing in the statement of expectation?
In what respect?
Insofar as our relationship and the way it's been set up with our statement of expectation, do you see anything that we're missing within the statement of expectation from a financial side?
Well, I mean, this isn't a matter for me in terms of the statement of expectations. That's not something that I've looked at in particular. My focus has been on ensuring that things like the debt transfer, all of those things are appropriately managed, and we're setting up things appropriately around things like their treasury management and having conversations with them in that regard, but certainly not in the statement of expectations.
But you're comfortable with how that's all panning out?
Look, it's all a work in progress, but absolutely comfortable that collectively the CFOs have got a good process to work with Te Aki Wai and feed into that. Yeah.
Thank you. I think no more questions, but if you have any more questions, I really encourage you to write it down now and send it through, and it will be written question answer coming back on Tuesday, 2 days before the meeting day. So I encourage you to send that question through to...
So it'll go through to Democracy Services, and there'll sort of be a collated document that we'll respond to. Yeah.
Cool. Thank you, councillors and officers, for today. We're done, and see you next week for the meeting.
Thank you.